what's going on, guys? How is everybody doing? Just want to give a quick shout out before we jump into the video. One of my community members was kind enough to help me out with the beginning of this video, capturing all the gameplay that you guys saw in the highlight there. My Ningguang is not currently built, so I reached out to this person because I knew that they were a big old Geo fan, and I figured they could help me, and they were kind enough to help me. So thank you so much for helping out with that. That took a lot off my shoulders. Now, if you remember, a week ago, I put out a video talking about the team comps for Albedo, and in that video, I requested to you guys, I put out a poll basically saying, hey, these are the team guides in this video. You guys get to choose which one do you want to see a highlight video on. You guys spoke, so today we are going to be taking a look at the Ningguang video, as that is what most of you wanted to take a look at. We'll be looking at, weapons, artifacts, talents, constellations, whatever you may need for this team. We're going to be looking at it in this video and how you should go about building this team for yourselves. We have so much info to get to, and I don't want to take up any more of your time than I have to, so let's just jump right in to Genshin Impact and talk about this team. So the first thing I want to talk about is the team resonances that we're aiming for. So on this team, we have both Fervent Flames and Enduring Rock, 2 Pyro, 2 Geo. Now, the reason that we're focusing on these is because Ningguang, as a Geo hero, she doesn't really have any beneficial reactions for damage output. She's not like a Diluc, where she doesn't have Melt and Vaporize, she's not like a Razor, she doesn't have Superconduct. So in terms of reactions, Geo is kind of lacking on the offense. So we need to get our damage from elsewhere. So we're looking at resonances. So of course we got Fervent Flames. We're getting an additional 25% attack, as well as Enduring Rock. So whenever she's protected by a shield, she's going to get an additional 15% attack damage. I shouldn't say she, that's all your party members, but this is attack damage, keep in mind. This is not just flat attack. So attack is going in just like your artifacts. It's all being calculated before anything, like any crits. Attack damage is being calculated after. So it's going to take that number that was calculated and add an additional 15% on top of that. It's still not as good as a 25% attack bonus. Plus, it's conditional. Sometimes it can be turned off if you're not protected by a shield, but that extra damage is going to be huge. All right, so this is the team comp that you guys voted on that you wanted to see a breakdown for. We have Ningguang, we have Albedo, Xinyan, and Bennett. So, of course, starting out, we have Ningguang. It'd be a pretty bad Ningguang DPS team if Ningguang wasn't on it. And then we have Albedo to round out our Geo Resonance. You could also technically put Zhongli here. Zhongli is, he has one of the best shields in the game. I like Albedo more here, though. He simply does more damage than Zhongli does when he's off the field. He also has very consistent crystallized triggers, especially paired with 2 Pyro heroes, so Ningguang can always kind of pick up the shields that are on the battlefield. We don't have to switch over to Zhongli to create a shield. He's also a lot better at energy generation, which is going to be important for Ningguang. That way we can get her burst up as fast as possible. For more of a budget build, you could use the Geo main character here. The Geo main character is very good when it comes to energy generation. The only downside to that, though, is when it comes to shields. The Geo main character is not going to be as consistent when it comes to generating shields, which is going to be very important for our Geo Resonance. So take that in mind. Geo main character does have a little bit of benefit, though. If you're standing inside their burst radius, you're going to get an extra 10% crit rate, which is not too bad. And I suppose I'll make a quick note here on Noelle, since you guys were very quick to point out that I didn't mention Noelle in my how to maximize your Razor damage video. The thing is, Noelle is not a support character. She is a carry. The reason why: she's not a very good healer. Her heals are not very strong. They're weak at best. They're also reliant on her having her shield active, not just any shield, but her shield specifically. So as soon as that breaks, all your heals are done. Also, the fact that she has to be on field while she's healing. So if you're building her for defense to get her heals up, she's not going to be doing a lot of damage. So because of that, you're losing a lot of damage. This is a problem with a lot of healers out there, is that you're building them for either HP or defense or whatever their scaling stat may be, and you're losing a lot of your damage. So we want to prioritize healers that either A, do a lot of damage themselves, or like Bennett, we'll see, can just kind of put down a healing ring, and then you can switch over to your main DPS, so that way they can continue doing a lot of damage. So because of that, I really wouldn't even consider putting Noelle on this team. Now, if you want a Claymore user, Xinyan is the girl we're going with. Really, she doesn't provide a lot of benefit for us here other than making a shield. We could build her more offensively, but you'll see in this guide, we're going to be building her a bit more defensively for her shield, even though it is my less preferred build. And finally, we have Bennett. Bennett pretty much just fits on whatever team you want. You could literally just put 3 sacks of potatoes on this team and a Bennett, and it would probably perform just fine. He's just that good. He's the secret 6-star of Genshin Impact. His heals through the roof. His attack buff is, I think, the best in the game. You can easily make it the best in the game, but he's just insane. If you want Pyro Resonance, you start with him and then you figure out which other Pyro support you want or your carry. But anyway, he's always like half of the Pyro Resonance. It's not even close. So we've gone over all our heroes and specifically why we've chosen each of them. Now it's time to delve a little bit deeper into them and how we're going to go about building them. First up is Ningguang. We'll take a look at her weapons here. When we're looking at weapons, if you have a 5-star catalyst, you can't go wrong with it. Literally all of the 5-star catalysts are very good on her. If you want to know which one's the best one, Skyward Atlas is overall going to give you the best damage. But I have a feeling that a lot of people are probably not going to have their 5-star catalysts because they're very hard to come by. So if that's the case, what 4-star weapons do we want to go with? The best in slot 4-star weapon for her is going to be Solar Pearl, which is the Battle Pass weapon. It's tied for the highest base attack out of all the 4-star weapons we're going to be looking at. Has a crit rate substat, which is very important for her. She's going to get a lot of damage out of her crits because, you know, we can't rely on those reactions, so we got to rely on crits. The passive on that weapon is also just incredible. It's going to increase the damage of either your skill and burst or attack, depending on, you know, the opposite one you're using, and it's very consistent. So that is going to easily be her best 4-star weapon. It's kind of a no-brainer, but moving on, the other weapons that we're looking at are 2 crit damage weapons. So we're going to be looking at Blackcliff Agate and Widsith. Now, I personally prefer the Blackcliff Agate here because it's a bit more consistent. You're going to get a passive attack boost anytime you kill an enemy, and if you can keep that attack boost up, it's going to be pretty consistent. Widsith, on the other hand, I feel like is tricking people into thinking it's better than it is for certain characters. For some, it's great because all the passives that you could get on it are very good. The problem here with Ningguang is that one of them is pretty bad, and that is Elemental Mastery. The other 2 passives that you could get when you switch in with Widsith are attack percent and elemental damage, both of which are very good and will actually provide you better stats than Blackcliff Agate. The problem is you're only getting this benefit for 10 seconds every 30 seconds, so a third of this time you're in combat with this weapon, you're gonna have buffs, but also 1/3 of the time you're getting an option that's not really adding, well, it's not adding any damage to your Ningguang, so that's another 30 seconds you gotta lose out on that boost where you could have an attack boost from Blackcliff Agate. Widsith definitely has a higher ceiling than Blackcliff Agate, but I prefer the consistency of Blackcliff Agate on this build. Next up, let's look at the free-to-play weapons that you can have access to. These are your craftable weapons, and we have Prototype Amber and we have Mappa Mare. And unfortunately, Catalyst users kind of got the short end of the stick in this department compared to the other weapon types because both of these are really bad. Let's just put it as it is. They're both pretty bad. Mappa Mare is better than Prototype Amber because you are going to get a bit of a damage bonus as opposed to just heals, which Ningguang does not need. Honestly, if you can help it though, it's probably better off just to go with an R5 3-star weapon. Twin Nephrite would be your best option here. Moving on to artifacts now, her best 2-piece set bonuses are going to be Archaic Petra and the 2-piece Gladiator's Finale. Glad pieces are kind of a nightmare to farm though. So if you're having trouble getting Glad pieces or you don't have any that work on her specifically, you can sub those out for Noblest Oblige pieces. Those are a little bit easier to farm. You will still get added damage on your burst. However, you're going to lose out some of the damage on your basic attack and your skill. If you wanted to go a little bit off this path though, you could go with a full 4-piece Retracing Bolide and just use that as your boost. If we do that though, it might be a little bit better instead of Xinyan to actually go with Zhongli if you have him, just because his shield is a little bit stronger than with Xinyan. But this piece will work with Xinyan. You'll just have to work a little bit harder to keep those shields on for maximum damage possible. In terms of stat priority on her artifact, she's going to be built like your typical carry. You're going to want attack on your timepiece, you're going to want geo damage on your cup, and finally you're going to want a crit stat on your circlet. Now, whichever crit stat you choose, that's going to depend on how high your crit rate is. Normally for carries, 40% is kind of the threshold that you'll want to hit. After that, then you can start going for crit damage, but before that, you really just need to invest in crit rate, get that up so that way more of your hits are going to be critical hits. For substats, they're pretty straightforward. Same thing. Prioritize crit, prioritize attack. After that, you know, energy recharge. Just stick with the offensive substats and you'll be more than fine. And looking at her talents, we're going to want to prioritize her auto attack first, burst second, and skill third. This is typically the order that you're going to be dealing damage with. Obviously, as your carry, she's going to be doing her auto attack most of all, followed by her burst because it just does way more damage than her skill, and lastly her skill because that's all that's left. And when we take a look at constellations, really the only one that you need to focus on getting to make her way better as a DPS is Constellation 1. This is going to turn all her normal attack hits into AoE damage. Catalysts have a kind of a problem when it comes to this. So if you're using a character that uses any kind of physical attacks other than a bow, there's always a chance for that hit to become an AoE hit just because it's a slash, right? If you have a sword, if you have a claymore, when you slash, you can hit multiple enemies. Well, Catalyst and bow users don't have that, so the fact that her Constellation 1 makes it so that her hits can become AoE damage is very nice. So if you're looking to build her for a carry, I highly suggest, if you don't, trying to get her to Constellation 1. If you don't have her at Constellation 1, if you have her at Constellation 0 and she does come back on better and you really like her, I would highly suggest trying to get to that Constellation 1. Next up, we have our first support unit, and that is Albedo. We're going to be building Albedo for defense because that's what his skill scales off of, and since we can just kind of leave him off the battlefield, he can do most of his damage that way, while Ningguang just like obliterates people with rocks. So looking at his weapon first, his best in slot is going to be Harbinger of Dawn. Now, this weapon does have a little bit of synergy issues on this team specifically, because if you take a look at its passive, when your HP is above 90%, it's going to increase your crit rate. However, because our healer is Bennett here, this doesn't work the best all the time, because if your Albedo gets hit and he drops below that 90% threshold, you're losing a lot of crit rate. So what are his other best in slot options? Well, the one that, if you've been playing and you have Albedo in terms of recently, is going to be the best is Festering Desire. Festering Desire is an energy recharge weapon, so you're going to be building up his burst faster for more burst damage, but the passive is going to increase elemental skill damage. And since it's what we're using Albedo primarily for, that's where he's going to get the most benefit, as well as getting a little bit of crit rate on top of that for his skill. Not too bad. The other two weapons I would consider putting on him are either Black Sword or Black Cliff Longsword, because both of these have a crit substat, which is going to be very important for getting his skill damage as high as possible. And in taking a look at his artifact sets, we're also going to see that one of his best sets here is a 2-piece Archaic Petra set, because most of the damage he does, if not all the damage he does, is going to be Geo, so that's going to give us the best bonus here. Now, in terms of his other 2-piece set bonus, one of the best ones you can give him is Defender's Will, which will give him an additional 30% defense. I'm not the biggest fan of going with sets that end at 4 stars. They don't have a 5-star variant. That's because you're going to lose a lot of substats. You're also going to lose a literal substat, not just in numbers. So I actually prefer to go with a 2-piece Noblesse Oblige, but Defender's Will be quite a bit cheaper to build than Noblesse Oblige, and Noblesse Oblige is a very generic set, and it can kind of go on anyone. So even if you're putting resources into those pieces, they can be shifted around and go on anyone, whereas Defender's Will really kind of just stuck with the characters that scale with defense, which is not many. And if you are using Defender's Will, make sure to try and get those on his Flower and Feather, because remember, he does max those out at 4 stars. Because of that, there's going to be a stat loss. So in order to mitigate the amount of stats we're losing, we want to keep it on those, because his damage doesn't actually scale on those at all. For his Timepiece, we're going to have him on defense. For his Cup, we're going to have him on Geo damage. And for his Circlet, you're probably going to want to have a crit stat on that. But if you don't, you can always go with defense there. The point is, we want these to be 5-star pieces, or at least build towards 5-star pieces, because they're going to give more stats. And that's where he's getting all his damage from. And then for substats, just make sure you're getting some crit, some defense, and energy recharge, and he will be just fine with those. Moving on to talents, we're obviously going to want to get his skill up, because that's the majority of what the damage he's going to be doing is from. Burst would be next. And then honestly, you can kind of just leave his auto attack. You're not going to be doing any damage with it because its scale is so low. So stick to his skill first, then his burst. For constellations, I'm not going to talk too much about these, because honestly, I don't think a lot of players will have constellations on these. But if you were so lucky to get some, C2 opens up his whole kit and it's incredibly good. That's like easily his best constellation. So Xinyan is kind of an interesting one, because normally what I suggest doing is just building her as heavy like offense support, right? Especially at C2, when her burst has 100% crit rate, you just build her heavy into crit damage, build her with like a Noblesse Oblige set, or 2-piece Noblesse Oblige, 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry, and just use her for raw damage. But on this comp, we have to build her a little bit differently, because we don't really have a great shield generator like a Zhongli. We need to have someone. So Xinyan is going to be like just our solid shield creator. So when we're looking at our weapons, best in slot here for shield specifically is probably going to be White Blind. You could argue it's Sacrificial Greatsword though. The reason is you're going to lose a little bit of power on the shield, but with this proc, you're going to be able to get her shield out more often. Her E does have quite a long cooldown at 15 seconds, so if you're finding that your shield breaks often, even, you know, going white blind and getting like an extra 500 to 1000 HP on the shield, which is honestly not that much, it will probably benefit you in going with Sacrificial Greatsword here. So that way you can get another shield activation every 15 seconds as long as it procs. And just like Albedo, you can also use Defender's Will on this set too. And just like Albedo, prioritize Defender's Will on your Flower and Feather first, because those are not going to affect her shield capacity whatsoever. That all being said, in terms of set bonuses, really like the best option is build Flower and Feather for Defender's Will and just pick your 3 best defense pieces. It doesn't even matter what the set bonuses are. Because you don't have any investment into your attack or damage at all, her burst probably isn't going to be hitting that hard anyway. So just literally find the best defense pieces you have, throw her on her. You're probably going to be throwing them away anyway. So on this build, this is kind of where your junk pieces can go. Now, in terms of constellations, this build is really great for players who don't have any constellations in their characters, because none of these constellations actually matter for this build. You could argue that Constellation 3 does, because it's getting the level up of our skill a little bit higher for, you know, more shielding. But honestly, it's like not really that worth it to go ahead and get a Constellation 3 character just for their shield. You're fine with Constellation 0. In terms of talents, of course, we want to be getting that skill up as high as possible, so that way we can level up her shielding. Next, you go ahead and get her burst up, which you can do for extra damage, but this build isn't going to be doing a lot of damage anyway. Lastly, her auto attack, which you can get up, but honestly, not that important on this specific build. And last up, we have Bennett, who's honestly just like one of my favorite characters in the game right now. He's just so good. Now, one of the things that I see a lot of players do that I'm not a big fan of is they build him too defensively. They build him like all into HP just for heals. Let me tell you, yes, his heals will be better if you build him into HP. However, you're going to be losing a lot of damage. So why don't we just build him for damage? His heals are more than fine without HP investment. So that's what we're going to do. We're kind of going to build Bennett as a carry, or like a secondary carry. And look, the build works really well. So in order to build this for his weapon, if you have a 5-star weapon, slap it on him, because honestly, having him with a high base attack is super important. That base attack is what's going to transfer over with his burst. It's not his total attack, so it's only the attack off his level and weapon. So getting him a high level weapon or a weapon with a high base attack table is going to be super important. So any of the 5 stars are going to work. Now, in looking at the 4-star weapons specifically, which ones are going to be the best for him? Well, the crit weapons, obviously, because we're kind of building him as a secondary carry, he's going to want a lot of crit stats, because he can get some really big hits in off his burst and skill. Even though we're not really getting any reactions here, he can still get some pretty big hits. Those are going to be both quite good. Flute will be pretty good. For free-to-play players who have a prototype going around, prototype Rancor is going to be good. He's not going to be doing a lot of physical damage, but, you know, base attack table is pretty good there, and it's definitely better than Iron Sting. For artifacts, like we already said, we're going to be putting on a 4-piece Noblesse Oblige set, so that way he just even further increases the attack of our team when he uses his burst. As far as his stats go on his pieces, on his timepiece, make sure you have either attack or energy recharge. If you find that you're needing energy recharge, or you just don't have an energy recharge weapon on him, go ahead, get him some of that energy recharge. That way he always has burst up. It's very important to always have access to that burst. If you're good with energy recharge, go ahead and put him into attack. For his cup, we're going to be putting him on pyro damage. That's what basically all of his damage is going to do on this kit, both between his skill and his burst. It's all pyro damage, so let's get that as high as possible. And then finally, for his circlet, of course, crit rate. You guys guessed it. Crit rate. If you don't have a crit piece at this point, because let's face it, pretty much every hero wants either crit rate or crit damage, you could also put him into either attack or HP, depending on what you want. If you want more damage, go ahead and go for attack, or if you want more healing, go into HP. But honestly, because this team kind of revolves around shields, healing is not the most necessary. So just keep that in mind when you're building him. That's one of the reasons also why it's not super important to build him fully into HP or HP at all on the specific team build. Now, looking at his constellations, C1 is a no-brainer. C1 breaks his kit apart in half, obliterates it. It's so good. The fact that you no longer have a restriction on the unit's health in order to get the attack bonus is huge. Also, the fact that you're getting an additional 20% of Bennett's base attack boosted, it's absurd. If you can get him to C1, I would say getting him to C1 is honestly probably worth like not getting a 5-star. That's how good it is. It's absurd. In terms of talents, we of course want to get his burst up as high as possible because we're looking for this. We want this attack bonus ratio to be as high as possible. We're also going to get more heals, but really it's just about spreading the love with his attack. Past that, you know, you want to get his skill up. And lastly, normal attack. For your supports, we really don't care about normal attack though, since our normal attack is basically always going to be our carry. So that was a whole lot of info about this team. Honestly, there was a lot of info to go through. Hopefully you guys made it through this video, because we are going to be showing off a little bit of gameplay from this team in action. We're also going to see a variation of this team taking out Xinyan and putting in Zhongli, so there'll be a little bit of that. All of this gameplay was also recorded, just like the intro, from one of my community members. Shout out to them again. Thank you so much for helping out with that. So just take a little bit of time if you want to see this team in action. Stick around for the next, you know, minute or two. We're going to close out the video with that. But before I go, just want to say to you guys, if you want to see some more content from me, you can head over to my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazze. Give me a follow over there. We stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday evenings. Or if you want to support me right here on YouTube, go ahead, click that red subscribe button, like the video if you liked it, and click that notification bell. That way you never miss a video, or when I go live, which I go live here on YouTube before I go live over on Twitch. And of course, if you want to be part of our community over on Discord, link will be down in the description below. But guys, that's it for me. I'm going to peace out. You guys can stick around and watch the showcase for a little bit, but that's all I got. Hopefully you guys have a good day. Enjoy the rest of the video.